Hello, I'm Deanne Keaton, Product Marketing Manager for Netlify. Today we get the opportunity to sit down with Jason Rhodes from Riot Games and talk about their journey of migrating their sites over to Netlify platform. All right, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Good, good. But tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Who am I? Such a deep question. So my name is Jason Rose. I'm a staff software engineer at Riot Games, and part of my roles and responsibilities are to help facilitate good practices, best standards for how we do web development across our organization.
Riot Games. So what is Riot Games?
So we are a producer and publisher of video games. We strive to be the most player-focused game maker in the world, and our portfolio of games includes titles such as League of Legends, Valorant, Wild Rift, Legends of Runeterra, and Teamfight Tactics.
Speaking of Valorant, that's one that comes up at my house a lot. I have a 16-year-old, and when you're talking about doing this conversation, it was like, could you ask him a couple of questions? So if it's all right with you, I want to be able to fulfill his his wishes.
I'll do my best.
Yeah. He was wondering if Split was coming back to the competitive queue.
Oh, that's a tricky question. Yeah, Split was definitely pulled off of the competitive queue. There are talks about possibly bringing it back later on in the future, but maybe with a few tweaks. No promises, but I'll try to put in a good word for you.
All right. The next one, which I get in trouble a lot for doing because I turn his computer off if he can't hear me. He's wondering how you track when people leave their keyboard and they get banned.
Oh, yeah, the AFKers. Yeah. So we actually have some secret trackers implanted in people's computer chairs so that we know exactly when they stand up. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. There's just all sorts of different sort of tells that we have to try and determine if a player is no longer participating in the game.
Got it. So he should just listen for when I yell for him the first time. So tell me a little bit more about what you do at Riot.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we at Riot Games, from the web development perspective, we create all sorts of out-of-game experiences to try and deepen the impact of our players' love and passions for our game products. For myself included, I've done all sorts of different things, from actually creating and building websites to creating standards and best practices for how different web development teams across the organization actually build and deploy their websites. And so that can be anything from talking about SSL strategy for SSL certificates, or it could be the various domain strategies, localization processes, continuous integration, continuous deployment pipelines, and how we host our actual websites as well.
And based on that, like what's the perspective that Riot has in regards to you guys' web presence?
So Riot Games views our web presence in a couple of different sort of aspects. One of them is with acquisition, and another one is with regards to retention. And with acquisition, whenever you go to initially try one of our games, you have to sort of go to one of our websites to sign up and create an account and to download the actual game itself. So we try to create and facilitate a frictionless pathway that provides players the most streamlined way to be able to get into the game. Along the way, our players are able to find and discover the sort of introductory paths of what is this game about and why should I be hyped about it, and et cetera, et cetera. And so that's the acquisition side. From the retention side, we definitely deliver relevant, high-quality content to our players as expediently as we possibly can. This can be information about new champion releases. Champions are the names of the characters in the game League of Legends, or agents in the case of Valorant. We talk about the game changes, patch notes, who's getting buffed, who's getting nerfed. And this kind of information is extremely important to our players, especially when you are very invested in our games, because you want to know what exactly is changing so that you can adjust your playstyle accordingly.
And is there a personalization piece to that from a gaming perspective?
Yeah,
as
great
a
question.
player?
We definitely have a bit of personalization, not as much as like some social media companies do, where
Mhm.
they have specific algorithms that target exactly who you are.
Right.
But we are trying to continue to improve upon the relevancy of the content that we deliver.
So tell me why you see your web presence as strategic.
So we strive to provide the most relevant and important content as quickly as possible to our players. Our players definitely have a high desire to always be informed of the latest and greatest of what's happening in our game ecosystem, and you can't always obtain that information directly within the games. And so our web strategy provides a very important role as it pertains to delivering that content and delivering that relevant information to our players. Additionally, as a part of the original installation and player acquisition side of things,
Mhm.
that touch point is absolutely critical to always be available, to be highly performant, and to be as frictionless as possible so the players can be able to quickly download the game and just get started and having a good time playing.
All right. So what core business metric do you think that strategy is driving?
So I think that from the perspective of retention, we are absolutely trying to be as creative as possible with different events and marketing promotions that we portray out to our community. A recent example is with our Star Guardians experience,
Mhm.
where we created a fantastic skin line. Skins are the cosmetic updates that you can be able to apply to the characters in our games, the champions in our game in League of Legends.
My son, he just said that his favorite feature right now is your skin randomizer.
Nice.
So,
Yeah. And to be informed about the different kind of skins that are available to you, you can't always get that information when you're strictly playing the game.
right.
And so we absolutely leverage web-based digital experiences as a platform to be able to inform, surprise, and delight our players for these different kinds of opportunities that they can have to cosmetically and aesthetically update their favorite players in the game.
Very nice. Um, how do you think about your developer productivity?
Developer productivity is very important because if we are too stagnant and too stale with the expediency that we deliver with digital experiences, then we are sort of missing the mark, especially in a world where we have very tight deadlines to be able to deliver on specific timeframes. We absolutely have to ensure that our developers have a clean pathway to be able to focus on the actual development of those experiences. And so with proper tooling and really good processes in place, it allows for our developers to be able to be in the clear and have the right kind of breathing room that's necessary to be able to focus on developing those amazing creative experiences. And so the process of providing that breathing room includes creating good standards, good best practices, so that developers don't have to continuously answer a lot of the common questions that you typically do with web development,
Right.
such as how do I do localization? How do I do an SSL certificate? How do I host this thing? What is my domain strategy supposed to look like? All of those things can add up to a lot of time, and that time could be better spent on actually writing the code necessary to build and deliver your experience.
Awesome. And how does that impact the decisions that you make on your tech stack?
So when it comes to the actual tech stack itself, there's many different facets to it. Often when you say tech stack, you quickly tend to think of maybe your JavaScript framework that you're using or your HTML templating engine or what have you. But the tech stack is all inclusive of the entire cycle. Continuous integration and continuous deployment of getting your code out of the source control management and built into the location that it's actually serviced out of. That's a big part of it. Also, the pathway for doing QA, for ensuring high level quality, internal environments and staging environments, and the CDN layer for fast performant delivery. All of these things play a huge role into the decisions of our tech stack. And we carefully choose the kind of technologies that we use with a very player-focused mindset. Our players have a high expectancy for the quality bar that we deliver because gamers tend to just look for the absolute best, especially in the technology suite.
Yeah.
As a gamer myself, I get really frustrated when I go to a website and it's sluggish, it looks a little maybe lopsided in one way. It's like, oh, it's just a little bit off-centered.
Yeah.
And if I see any kind of fault in the website, I immediately erode my brand trust in whatever website that I was looking at.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not alone.
No, I was like, I do that with e-commerce in general. Right? Like any slowness, we're more in this immediacy, and as the digital age continues to broaden,
absolutely,
the expectation gets higher.
And when you need to make a change or any kind of an update, be it a typo or a bug fix, it needs to be executed on quickly and delivered in a very expeditious fashion. And so our tech stack, all the way from the continuous integration, continuous deployment side of things, up to the kind of code and the structure of our code, is all finely selected for developer efficiency and expediency of delivery.
What can you tell me about your old web stack?
Our web presence came about around 2008, and it's definitely evolved a lot since then. In the last maybe 5 years or so, we have made use of statically generated websites to provide a high level of availability that doesn't rely on server-side rendering and server-side content generation, because servers can go down when you get a big hug of death from a lot of players coming through. And so by moving into that sort of structure, it has allowed us to be able to be a lot more performant to scale. But when we set that process up, we set it up in such a way that had a lot of in-house custom tooling, specifically using Jenkins for our continuous integration, continuous deployment, to rebuild the actual statically generated files. And we would push those out to like an Amazon S3 bucket, very traditional, very standard in the ecosystem. And then from there, we would have a CDN layer in front of the Amazon S3 buckets to provide that caching layer for highly available and fastly delivered content.
Because you recently started a modernization product with Netlify. Can you tell me what prompted that?
So we evaluated different web platform hosting technologies because we wanted to improve and scale our web development ecosystem. There were quite a few different bottlenecks in the Jenkins, AWS, and CDN strategy. And one of those was the sort of self-autonomy or managing your own destiny aspect. In the world of Jenkins and custom tooling around Jenkins, Jenkins is awesome, but it does have certain limiting factors surrounding configuration management and a very opinionated structure for the way that website delivery actually happens. And we wanted to move into a world where the web developers were able to have more control over their ability to deploy and build and generate their websites. And as such, we did a full market evaluation on a lot of different companies to identify which would be a good partner, a good fit with us, both philosophically and from a technical standpoint, that would empower our developer teams to have that autonomy to be able to manage their own destiny. A bottleneck inside of the static generation ecosystem had quite a few different configuration point managements blockers. An example of that could be something as simple as environment variables. An environment variable it can be used to change which maybe database or sort of version of content that you want to pull down your content from. And in different internal environments, such as a staging environment, a production environment, and so on and so forth, you will have different environment variable values to facilitate your entire development process. And in our Jenkins, AWS, CDN strategy, it was very opinionated and it was controlled by just a few gatekeepers on the team. So we didn't want to have developers rely on email exchanges to be able to run various configuration updates. We wanted them to update their configuration points themselves. And this included their internal development environments, as well as applying and updating SSL certificates, as well as even simple things like redirect options. All of these kinds of things were tightly controlled in a very opinionated pathway. And we wanted to open this up so that, again, developers could just control their own web experiences that they were building. Moving into Netlify allowed for us to be able to pass that control onto the developers who know exactly what they need out of their website. And then they don't have to email like someone like me every other day for, hey, I need a new redirect in place, or I need this environment variable updated. They can just go off and conquer without having any barriers.
Very nice. The developer autonomy, that's a great reason to continue to explore. And developers like autonomy for sure.
That's right.
Tell me about what it was like to make that transition in Netlify.
There are different strategies that Netlify provides that really allows for a smooth transition. The broad array of framework support, the capacity for custom build plugins, as well as the ability to have very customizable redirect rules and rewrite proxies and header management. It filled in all of the necessary gaps for an easy parity of a transition all the way through. Internal build environments, various forms of build previews allowed for us to have a very strong QA process along the way, which made the transition extremely smooth and very easy.
Love to hear it. What was it like working with the team?
Oh, it was absolutely epic. The team carries the same philosophy at the core as what we do. We aspire to be the most player-focused game company in the world, and Netlify absolutely carries that same spirit of aspiring to be the most developer-focused technology company in the world. It may not be part of their mission statement, but it probably should be. Ultimately, throughout the entire time, there was a high sense of very deep collaboration, understanding and meeting our business requirements, and coming through with extremely knowledgeable, highly professional, and incredibly capable individuals that were able to provide solutions, provide various forms of collaboration and feedback along every single step of the way. No stone unturned. The entire team definitely demonstrated what it means to create and facilitate not just a smooth transition, but a good partnership for delivering web-based experiences.
It's great to hear a story like that. What about moving your Legacy CDN? Like, what was that effort like, and what were the requirements there?
So our Legacy CDN, we had a fantastic CDN partner, and we still make use of them in various capacities. So we were really scared about moving off of them because they're a very powerful tool set. Right. So we had to do our diligence with various forms of performance testing and doing a full comparison of Netlify's CDN compared to our existing CDN provider. And not just from a single location, but we had to spread it out across different geolocations among the world because we are very, very global. Yeah. To our surprise and delight, Netlify actually had a slightly better performance on all of the different performance metrics that you would measure in web development, from the first byte to first paint, first contentful paint, and overall page render time. Everything from different locations across the globe was anywhere from 10 to sometimes 20% of a difference that was really a shocker. Yeah. And it was something that we didn't expect. We were hoping for somewhat of a close parity, but it actually ended up being more performant than our existing CDN provider.
So what would you say is your biggest challenge that you have with the migration?
So I think one of our biggest challenges with the migration was actually two different challenges. One of them was the full audit of everything that we had built up in the legacy code bases over the years. and making sure that all of those pieces were brought over in a way that was a smooth transition where our players wouldn't have noticed. And doing that required an extensive level of QA. It required a whole lot of just trying to remember what did we do back then, and bringing it to the forefront so that we made sure to check all of those boxes along the way. That was part one. Part two was we needed to take this time as an opportunity to go ahead and update some of our the versions of the frameworks that we were using to best make use of the Netlify build caching process. And to do that required all sorts of dependency updates, and with those dependency updates, you would find that certain packages are no longer supported, and you'd have to make certain changes here and there. But again, doing it in such a way that players wouldn't have even noticed. And in that pathway of doing both the full audit of what exactly is getting brought over and the history that comes with it, along with all of those different version updates with our framework that we were using, it created a pretty substantial challenge, but it was very necessary. And it brought forth quite a few different returns on those respective investments. Previously, our build times for certain websites would be anywhere from 15 to 20, sometimes even 25 minutes. But now, inside of a Netlify build jobs with a cached build, it would be about a 3-minute build time. So the build performance enhancements of going from 15 to 20 minutes to 3 to 5 minutes was absolutely critical and incredibly valuable for our content producers. Being able to deliver the content to our players and any kind of updates or mistakes or typos to an article in an expedient fashion is absolutely critical. The internet moves quickly, and we have to move quickly with it. Having a strong pipeline that allows us to expediently deliver content out to players in that 3-minute time window was a huge bonus to moving into the Netlify cached builds, and it absolutely made those pains of updating our framework from an earlier version to a more modern version absolutely worth it.
Yeah, and player impact is of the utmost importance.
Absolutely.
What would you say is the productivity impact that you had out of this overall migration?
First of all, by removing the bottleneck of some of those common problems that you would experience with domain management and certificate management, just completely went away. And that alone shaved off anywhere from 2 to 3 days up to sometimes 2 to 3 weeks of the initial project kickoff for the maybe one-off web experiences that we would create. And on top of that, the ability to create your own internal environments for testing and QA allowed for even just a few more days, even further, of all of those email exchanges of, hey, sysadmin person, can you please set this up for me? You don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And in the world of Netlify, again, back to that autonomy, controlling your own destiny, our web development teams are able to just go forth and conquer and really focus on crafting the experience rather than crafting the hosting pipeline.
So how did this add value to your bottom line, in regards to like performance and efficiency of your site?
Yeah, the bottom line question. So bottom line, of course, always comes down to dollars and cents. And we actually had one really fantastic surprise outside of developer efficiency and removing some of those common requests that would normally take up additional time in the development lifecycle. We had an additional surprise of moving our content and all of our websites over to Netlify. The way that Netlify does their HTTP caching out of the box is extremely well thought through and carries a high level of awareness of how just the web works, especially on an edge caching level.
Right.
And with this migration, it allowed for us to maintain the same volume of traffic that our websites handle, but at a much lower bandwidth usage by about 300%. And bandwidth, of course, comes down to the bottom line.
Right.
With any kind of hosting provider, you pay for bandwidth. Traffic's not free. And with that level of bandwidth reduction, we actually ended up saving quite a bit of money with moving to Netlify. That alone was a beautiful surprise.
Yeah, added value through and through. How would you rate your overall experience with Netlify?
5 stars. Yeah. Netlify, at the beginning, you could tell that they carried the same principle and the same philosophy that we carry, which is being extremely focused on your audience. And in Netlify's case, their audience is their developers. And with the way that we collaborated very closely with the team, listening to our business requirements and really trying to understand the goals of what we were trying to accomplish, there was a very, very high level of awareness within the Netlify team. And they brought that with them every single conversation that we had with them, providing the level of expertise and the technological awareness of the different ins and outs of a fast-moving space such as web development definitely put a high level of assurance on the partners that we were getting ready to start working with. And it allowed for this natural bond and relationship to just start growing, because Riot Games, we're very passionate too. We're very passionate about what we do. And that passion, when two different companies share the same level of passion, it brings forth magic.
Yeah.
And that's really the best thing that you can ask for in any kind of a business arrangement. With the way that the Netlify crew onboarded us and introduced themselves, all the way through after we even migrated some of our websites into Netlify, the same level of care and the same level of passion was constantly exhibited. There was never a moment where we felt like the Netlify team was ready to just stop working with us. You know, even after we signed the contract and moved some of our websites over, and we continue to move our websites over, they always exhibited a high level of passion, high level of care, and were constantly listening to our concerns. Even with some of the recent features that have been rolled out inside of Netlify, they have been completely aligned with some of the needs that we were really looking for. A good example of that is the environment variables and the way that Netlify manages environment variables, providing a pathway for sort of scope level values of environment variables in which you can change the value depending on if you're in a deploy preview or a specific branch deploy versus your production deploy. And making that level of granularity in place was a fantastic fit, and it rolled out after we had already started working with Netlify. And that was a good example of how things just continue to improve all the time with the product offerings and features that Netlify brings to the table.
As we said, that that passion of player experience, definitely flows over into our passion for building for developers, making the web as best as it possibly can be for that audience. What would you say your vision for future project collaboration? I mean, I know you can't get into the weeds with this, but as you've exemplified like your journey, the partnership continuing to roll out features that supported your needs. How do you see like the relationship with Netlify continuing like long term?
Yeah. Oh, that's a tough one. So I think ultimately I expect in the future for the things of the past to continue, but only get stronger and better. Every person that I've met with Netlify, yourself included, has been extremely professional, extremely capable, very passionate about what they do. And as we continue to work on future projects, such as some of our unannounced, some of our games that we've announced, but we haven't actually unveiled them fully to the world, Project L, we fully expect to work in close collaboration with Netlify to be able to deliver those best-in-class web experiences to our players and meet those high level of expectations that they demand out of us.
All right, well, that's all the questions that I had for you today. I appreciate you taking the time. Very excited for this opportunity and look forward to our continued partnership.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.